Hello everybody, it's Silver, and this is Tales of Lyfael. At least, so I hope you pronounce it. I'm not actually sure. I've been wanting to take a look at some RPGMaker stuff because I believe there's some pretty good stuff to be found there if you know where to look. And I figured what better place to start doing that than an amateur RPG made mostly by like one person. After all, this engine has a long history of being used this way to make some pretty memorable stuff. You know, when I think of the name RPGMaker, these are the kinds of games that immediately come to mind. I chose this one specifically because it sounded like a good place to start. A class system and tons of abilities are good ways to get my attention, and I noticed the sprite work seemed quite good as well. So, hopping into this, I go with these games with a bit of a different lens than I usually do. Partly because I know these are often made by people without loads and loads of development experience, and partly because I know the engine itself has some limitations that can't exactly be surpassed. So my bar for an RPGMaker game that charges money is mostly set to look for custom content. I want to see a custom combat system that isn't just the most standard one possible, custom sprites for characters and enemies, some nice tile designs for the world, and custom maps to explore. I'll accept some placeholder or default stuff here and there personally, but I'd like to see as much of this stuff replaced as possible. When it comes to visuals, there's only so much you can do in this engine, but there's still a good amount of room for using your own art. To that end, this game does a pretty good job. The tile-based environment art looks pretty good. I'm sure there are some default assets here, but the environments themselves look nice to explore and are well decorated. Houses feel lived in, ancient temples feel ancient, and thick jungles feel dark and foreboding. Just as important as making custom assets is the ability to use the default ones coherently to create a world with the feel you're looking for. One thing that's a definite advantage this game has is that it's about exploring several different realms in one large journey. This means the environment and tile variety is extended significantly due to the fact that you can be in entirely different worlds back to back. Between the themed worlds you can visit and the themed tower floors you can crawl through, there's a lot of visual variety in a short span of gameplay time. It's nice to get a pretty classic 16-bit vibe for a while exploring one place and then switch to a completely different one that's just as nicely tiled out shortly after. Character sprites are the standard GB style with cute details in their clothing to help tell them apart. Nothing groundbreaking, but nothing bad either. The character portraits, however, have a nice custom style to them. They're colorful and pretty detailed anime-esque portraits that you'll see both during battle and during conversations. It helps in games like this that the portraits look nice, because they're the main identifiers for your characters along the journey, since there's not a whole lot of voice acting or anything like that. Where the art style shines the most, though, in my opinion, is in the enemy sprites. They look pretty cool, and there are huge numbers of them to discover. The thing that does it for me is that all enemies, regardless of type, have this cohesive matching art style that they're made with. From belligerent bats to angry angels and devious demons, they all were clearly drawn in the same style. It's a colorful and kinda angular style that tends towards sharp proportions and accented colored bits to help you identify them. Bosses in particular have large and detailed sprites that are fun to look at and tend to have quite a bit of personality. As far as the sound goes, it's a little bit more mixed. The sound effects all seem to be stock ones, and even flashy combat effects seem to draw from the same library. This is the most forgivable of stock asset uses in my opinion, because good sound effect packs can be expensive, and not everyone has the know-how to create custom sound effects when they need to. However, much more important than sound effects is the music. The music doesn't appear to be stock stuff and is actually custom for this game from what I can tell. I'll admit that the music didn't always catch my attention in a big way, but it is nice background music for a multi-realm adventure. Music for a game where you go between several worlds can be hard to make, because each world usually has completely different vibes that you want to capture. But this does actually seem to take that in stride. I like a lot of the exploration music being a chill fantasy sound. I especially like tracks like those in the Fantasy Forest, which is somewhat reminiscent of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion's music. I also appreciate much of the boss music being a sort of orchestral metal arrangement. It's a bit tricky to judge the audio-visual presentation of an RPGMaker game, depending on the amount of custom content that's used. But I think this one does plenty in the visuals department to create an identity other than RPGMaker default. The cool enemy art is the standout of its presentation, and it'll be the main thing that I remember from this game graphically. I'll say I don't think the story is for me. I don't really find any of the characters interesting as like people individually, and no one character get to the amount of development I would need to get invested. The dialogue is riddled with deliberately bad jokes, so if you enjoy that kind of thing, there's plenty of it here. But for me, that style of writing doesn't really work. It just kind of feels like nothing is serious and no one truly cares about anything that's happening. There are some moments of odd English and plenty of typos to go around, which I almost feel is necessary for an RPG Maker game, but overall I didn't find any of it to be in an extreme, as in nothing completely illegible and nothing so stiff and awkward that you can't tell what they were going for. Just know that storytelling and characters aren't necessarily this game's strong suit. Gameplay-wise, this is a pretty classic 16-bit RPG mechanically, and the combat is actually pretty fun. First, you'll be exploring the various areas to find your way through the story. Exploration is highly rewarded in this game due to the large amount of hidden chests and optional encounters you can find. You'll be walking around all sorts of places, from forests to ruins to icy caves and some less easy to describe places. While walking about, you'll want to keep an eye out for chests. These often have useful items in them and rarely will contain new equipment as well. Some are in plain sight, while others take a bit of a detour to find, and some are even hidden behind other sprites and tiles to make them really hard to see. There are no random battles in this game. Instead, all enemies will approach you or jump out on you while exploring, starting battles in specific places instead of at random intervals. They can hop out of trees or bushes to surprise you, and they also don't respawn. Once you clear a screen of all the encounters, they'll stay gone, allowing you to pass peacefully. There will also be lots of optional encounters a bit out of the way. Some areas act as optional mini-dungeons with an optional boss at the end. Others will be just hard enemies with special drops, or mini-bosses hiding out in far corners of the world. Combat is a pretty standard turn-based affair with a focus on efficient use of MP to get through the battles. When it's one of your character's turns, you can choose to use a basic attack or cast a spell / use a skill. Skills and spells are drastically more powerful than basic attacks, but they cost MP, and you don't start with very much. Some character classes get quite a bit more as they level, but many don't, and will only have the ability to use like 3 skills before running dry. The game has an elemental rock, paper, scissors system that can drastically increase or decrease the damage you do. It's not quite Shin Megami Tensei levels of important, but it's still pretty important to be aware of elemental strengths and weaknesses. Hitting weaknesses means much more damage, which means less MP drain on your damage dealers. There are lots of classes in-game, each having different skills acquired on level up, contributing to a certain type of build. You can find lots of different pieces of gear, and with each class able to equip certain types, you often get an easy look at how to build them based on what their class can do. Some classes are pretty simple, but others can be much harder to use effectively, like the Copy Mage or the Enchantress. You have a 4-member party for battle, but you can carry all the characters you want with you for switching at any time. It also has the expected row mechanic for guarding squishy characters with sturdier ones. The enemies can take advantage of this as well. You cannot reinforce your party once wiped with any extra characters you have. It's game over if all 4 go down. Experience is pretty valuable in this game due to the non-respawning enemies. It doesn't take a huge amount of XP to level up on average, and this is the kind of RPG where 1 or 2 levels makes a noticeable difference. You get significant stat increases on leveling, and also often new spells and skills to diversify what that character is capable of. Only your 4 active characters get any experience, unfortunately, so you'll have to be active in switching characters out if you want to level more than 4 at a time. You'll notice when browsing through spells and such that there are lots of status effects in this game. Many of them, I've noticed, are extremely powerful and can be used against you just as easily as you can use them. You can create rotations of attacks based on party composition for the best damage, and try to use each character's MP as efficiently as possible to create opportunities for big burst damage. You'll also notice pretty much all spells and skills have cooldowns, as well as costs. These are often 2 or 3 turns long, so you can't rely on just having one powerful attack to blow the enemies up, since for the next 3 turns you gotta find other things to use. This means one rotation isn't enough either, as your characters will get future turns and have to adapt their strategy based on what they can still cast. All this means the combat is clearly going for a deliberate tactical approach, and I think it pulls it off pretty well. There's a decent amount of strategy to boss fights beyond just burst them down because of the power of status effects and how bursting too hard with no strat can just lead to you being out of MP against a boss that's still alive. AoE spells are very helpful while exploring, and they tend to cost 3 or 4 times the amount of a single target spell, so you gotta ration those guys out. Multi-hit spells and skills tend to be the most powerful things you have, and are a godsend when you learn them, but of course they can be quite pricey to cast as well. As you use a skill or spell multiple times, it'll build up this meter under the name. When it fills up, that skill will level up, which decreases the cost of using it. You can level everything to 3 for maximum cost reduction. There's also an interestingly large number of skill tomes that you can use to teach characters particular skills regardless of their class. These help you fill out the builds of characters based on what you think they may be missing and are a nice addition, honestly. There's also a crafting system, one for consumables and one each for weapons and armor. You'll come across lots of materials from monster drops and just by exploring. And there are also special materials that you can only get in very specific ways. There are elemental blades for crafting powerful swords hidden in the realms, and big bosses often drop souls that you can use to craft unique weapons. Gear does make a pretty big difference to your stats, so it's worth finding the perfect set for each character. And if I had a problem with the game, it would be right here, the game balance. Balance is kinda all over the place in this game, and it doesn't so much have a difficulty curve as a difficulty seesaw that randomly goes up and down. The real issue here are the status effects. I think they're simply too powerful. There are too many statuses that simply disable characters entirely for extended periods of time and lead to guaranteed death. It seems like every other enemy type has a hard disable that lasts for 3 turns and can be cast on the whole party at once. You know it's bad when you can fight through fiery demons and dark creatures with little difficulty, but then in the same area, a single bat can wipe you out immediately. Just a bat. Bats have an attack that charms the whole party at once, causing them to fight each other and be uncontrollable for 3 straight turns. And if they survive, the bat can cast it again to stack the duration. The bats are so fast that they'll always get the first turn and just stack this debuff until you die. There are other enemies that are super fast and will instantly cast a petrify attack that turns the whole party to stone at once. No duration, they just cast it at the start before you can do anything and pick you apart at their leisure. The issue here isn't that debuffs are strong, it's that they completely remove the ability to control your whole party at once and are cast so fast that they come out before any of you can get a single turn to do anything about it. This feels extremely cheap and unnecessary, as you'll be going through a challenging area and having a good time, and then suddenly you encounter something that shuts your entire party down instantly and can't be beaten because you don't actually get a turn. The rest of the balance feels difficult but enjoyable, but these enemies, specifically the ones with party-wide hard disables, and there are plenty of them, are just not fun to fight. I would honestly recommend removing the AoE element to some of these effects to balance them. If they're going to be so absurdly strong, honestly overpowered, that they can wipe me at turn 1, then they shouldn't be able to use them on every character at once. But aside from that one issue, I think the overall combat scape is nicely strategic and fun. There's also a tower, importantly. This tower has several themed areas with elementally aligned enemies and mini floors in each section. The floors start at level 5 and increase in what seems like 5s from there, I think. The tower is the only place where enemies respawn, and there are also other resources and loads of treasure chests to be found there. This is an excellent place to go for a little grinding, or just a few levels before going back to the main story. The gear you can find here is also nice, so basically consider this a place like a character improvement dungeon you can optionally go to whenever you want, kind of like doing the item world in Disgaea or something. This game uses save points for saving, but also occasionally auto-saves in 2 slots, but the save crystals also act as teleports for fast travel. You can poke one of these crystals whenever you want and go to any other crystal you've found so far. Super useful for side quests, for revisiting towns and finding optional encounters you missed on your first time through. Speaking of side quests, there are some, and they can be surprisingly in-depth. Some of them are simple matters of getting a few fish livers for the nice old lady, but a lot of them involve going to or finding things in places that are out of the way. I like that sometimes I'll go off the beaten path and find a hard optional mini-boss and then get a key item from it. Then in the next town, I get a quest where I have to go and put that key in an altar or something, and then summon an even harder boss that drops sick loot. There's this cool bit of continuity when it comes to exploration and side quests kind of aligning and a satisfying multi-step kind of way to reach a conclusion. Honestly, I think I went into this with my mind open to smoothing over imperfections due to the game being a small amateur creation. I love seeing stories like this, and I enjoy small devs getting the ability to put something into the world, even if it's using a maker engine like RPGMaker or GameMaker, due to the fact that it's often unfiltered creativity. The unrefined and rough creation of a singular mind, flawed but unique. However, I ended up not really needing to think that way, because the game feels quite well made at the end of everything. If this is a representation of the kind of stuff I can find in the modern commercial RPG Maker scene, then I'll be happy to dig for more and see what else I can find. I'm the kind of person that often enjoys RPGs at a mechanical level, even if I'm not enjoying the story. I like both, but if necessary, I can enjoy a neat attempt at interesting mechanics, even if the plot doesn't blow me away. This was one of those, and I think that feeling will be called upon again as I try more of these for the future. I'll put the Steam store page for this game down below if you'd like to take a look at it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.